welcome back to Ooh Not Alicia. This is Tutorial Tuesday and I'm in a Facebook group and one of the young ladies wanted me to do a tutorial on how I do heels for my socks. Now I do different type of heels for my socks depending on the mood that I'm in. I've tried the afterthought heel and I've tried the shadow short row heel. But today I'm going to do a slip stitch heel. And this is very common on YouTube and I am just going to go ahead and get started. So right now all I have is just my regular socks that I've been working on. You know I like to do toe up, and this is my main color yarn and then my contrasting toe, heel, and cuff yarn. So I'm at the point where I'm ready to start my heel. So I've went around, measured to the point that of where my heel needs to be inserted. Then all I did was add my contrasting color and I knit it around because this is my back side, because my front side has my stitch marker of what's indicating when I go around. So this is my back side, and so because I'm inserting a heel or inserting a contrasting color, I knitted across, then I turned and then I purled back, and now I'm ready to actually start the pattern. So if you're not adding a contrasting color, then you don't need to knit and then purl back. You can just go ahead and start where we are. But if you are adding a contrasting color, I recommend that you knit your color in and then purl back to get you back on this side. So what we're going to do, and so for me, I have 64 stitches around, which is 32 on each side because I do the magic loop method, and that fits my foot. And the person that I'm making this for, it fits that person's foot as well. So what I have, or what I'm working on, is 32 stitches, 2 at a time. So what you're going to do is you're going to keep the yarn. Let me zoom in. Okay. You're going to keep the yarn in the back, but you're going to slip stitch, you're going to slip stitch purlwise. So you slip stitch and then you knit. And then you're going to continue this all the way down. Slip purlwise and then knit the stitch. Knit the next stitch. Slip and then knit the next stitch. And you're going to continue this down . When you come to the last stitch, my last stitch is knitting, you're going to knit through the back loop. So being that I did videos on how to knit, I'm breezing through this as far as how to knit. When I turn this over, we're going to have a bonus video on how to purl. So I'm working 2 at a time. So I'm going to do my other side, but if you're doing 1 sock at a time, then just give me a minute until I get to this one looking like this one, and I will meet you back here shortly. So I'm ready to turn my work, so all I'm doing is just flipping my work around, and now I'm going to purl backwards. So First stitch when purling, I'm just going to slip it because what we want to do is create these little V stitches along the side, because we're going to use those stitches to pick stitches up once we get to that route. So I'm just going to have my needle underneath my working yarn, and I'm going to slip purlwise, and then I'm going to just slip the rest of the, purl the rest of the stitches. In order to purl, and you want to be careful because you have slip stitches, you want to be careful that you're picking up those stitch that's intended, because see how this one is covering that one? You want to be clear and make sure of that. So in order to purl, you stick your needle through the loop from right to left, so going straight like this. Your yarn should always be in the front. So when we knit, our yarn is in the back, but then when you purl, keep your yarn in the front before moving your needle, okay? Make sure your yarn is in the front before moving your needle at all. So with your needle should look like this with the two loops. You're going to take your yarn, your working yarn, and you're going to wrap it around counterclockwise around your needle. You're going to pull through, and you just created a purl. And if you see, the bumps indicates purls while V's indicate the knit stitches. So I'm gonna do that again. And I know that the young lady who requested for me to show the heel knows how to purl, but because I haven't showed you guys, all my other viewers, how to purl, I figure I can knock two birds with one stone and do that as well. So with the yarn in the front, you see how the yarn is in the front, coming from the front, I'm going to stick my needle inside the loop, the next loop, from right to left, straight like that, okay? Then I'm going to take my working yarn and I'm going to wrap it around counterclockwise, and I'm going to push my needle through and have this loop fall off the needle just like a knit stitch. Pull a little tight, and I know I did it right because I see this bump right here. And so continue on with the pattern. You're just going to purl all the way around. When you get to the last stitch, just purl that one as well. You do not have to slip stitch it. Purl that stitch, because when we turn it over, we're going to slip stitch that one. So make sure that when you're purling these, you're purling the slip stitches as well, because they can kind of hide with the regular knit stitches, and you don't want to purl them together. You want to purl each individual stitch. And if you have to count when you're finished, just to make sure that you have the number that you started with, I highly recommend that you do so, because you would hate to keep going, and then when you feel like you're almost done, you realize that you had a big mistake and you have less stitches than you need. So continue purling across, and I'm going to purl the next sock, and I will meet you back at the end or at the next round. Okay, so I just got finished purling across on both socks, and now I'm ready to do the first round again. So if you can see right here, you can see that this little stitch is kind of raised. That will show you that your slip stitches. And so once, of course, I start doing this pattern for more rows, these slip stitches will be more defined and I will be able to see it. So what you're going to do is you're going to repeat the same thing that you did, and as I'm talking, I'm going to do it as well. You're going to, for the first row, you're going to slip and then knit the next stitch, and then slip, knit the next stitch, and you're going to continue that on. When you get to the last stitch, you're going to knit in the back loop. You're going to turn your work, and then you're going to purl. You're going to slip the first stitch, and then you're going to purl across, and you're going to continue that for however many rows of number of stitches that you have. So I think I just messed up. Hold on, let me see. Yep, because I just knitted twice while I'm talking. Okay, so I knit this one and then slip. So I have 32 stitches, right? Because that's half of 64 that I actually need. So I'm going to knit for 32 rounds, one row, second row, 32 times, and then I will be ready to go move on to the next step. If you count your rows by twos, because you know you got to knit and purl, and you count that, well, not count it as twos, but if you count 2 rows as one because you have to knit and purl, then you would do half of what you're working with. So I would do it for 16 rounds if I'm counting my knit and purl as one round versus doing it for 32. But while I'm talking, I'm over here messing up. So I hope that was clear though. I want you to, hold on. I want you to knit for however many stitches that you have. Like I said, I have 32 stitches, so I want you to knit for whatever you have on your needle, and then we will meet back when we're all together ready to start the next step. Alright, so I'll see you when I'm at my 32 rounds of this slipping, slip, knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, knit in the back loop. When I get to the last stitch, turn it around, slip the first stitch, and then purl back. And I'm going to continue that for 32 rounds. So I'll meet you back. So I forgot to mention too how, well, I mentioned it briefly, how you can see what row you're on by counting the stitches on the side, because I told you that we're going to pick these stitches back up. That's why we're doing these slip stitches and knitting in the back. So if you would look, let me get the other needle. Let me see. If you can see, let me zoom in. If you can see these little V's, these are what you can count, and these are what you're going to be picking up later when we get to that point. But if you want to knit and say you forgot what row you're on, if you just count these V's up, you know, along your work, then that will be a good thing as well for you to do. Also, remember I told you that the slip stitches are starting to form and they're popping up. You can count the slip stitches as you go along to see what row you are on as well. So continue working this pattern. It's very, very easy. Let me know how you like it. Leave a comment down below, and I will see you once we're all ready to knit or turn the heel. Remember the trick that I told you as far as you can count the loops that's coming from the end if you want to know what row or round that you're on? So what I decided to do was get a few stitch markers that I just had laying around and actually mark the stitch that I need to count. And so when I do it like this, I'm going up to 16 rows. Yes, because 16 times 2 is 32. 32. And that's what I started with. I started with 32, so I need to go to 16. So once I have 16 of stitch markers coming across my socks, then I know I have completed all the rounds. And it has to be on both sides, because as you're working, if you're counting them as you're working, you'll realize that one side will be one off, because when you're working both the knit round and then the purl round, and so you have to account for both of those. And so that's why I will have 16 stitch markers versus 32, because this is counting as one full round, knit and purl, or row if you want to look at it. So if this is easier for you to do while you're knitting your rounds, then you can put a stitch marker on there, and that should help you as you're counting. But this is so far what I got, and just continue to go on until you get to the appropriate round or row that you're supposed to go. So I hope you're having fun with this, and I know this yarn looks similar. I made socks with a different color of contrasting heel, cuff, and toe. So yeah, I will meet you back once I am finished.